The wind blew cold that autumn afternoon, cutting my skin like thin, sharp blades. I walked down a nearly deserted street between old buildings with worn facades, some with broken windows, others covered in graffiti that seemed more like screams than art. My footsteps echoed on the stone sidewalks, and each sound seemed amplified, as if the world were holding its breath along with me. It was in this strange silence that something gleamed among the tall grass near a fallen wall. Curious, I approached slowly, my heart beating irregularly, as if I already sensed that this moment would not be ordinary. Among dry leaves and fragments of rubble, something metallic caught my attention. At first I thought it was just old trash, a piece of scrap discarded by time. But when I carefully lifted it, my fingers touched a cold, rigid object, an old gas mask. The rubber still exuded that pungent, chemical smell that seemed steeped in history, and the glass glasses now fogged and scratched are EFLECTE my distorted image. A shiver ran down my spine. That mask wasn't just a piece of military equipment. It was a fragment of the past, a reminder of breaths of fear, of moments when the air was poisonous and every second of life felt like a battle. As I held it, I felt the weight of decades of silence. Every detail transported me to places I'd rather forget. I remembered the deafening sound of explosions, the smell of gunpowder mixed with blood, the dust that engulfed everything around. I relived those dark days, but this time in the middle of an abandoned neighborhood, hundreds of kilometers from any battlefield. The mask seemed to pulse in my hands, as if it had absorbed the fear, pain, and despair of those who had worn it before me. Then I heard a crack behind me. I turned sharply, but there was no one there. Only shadows elongated by the trees, moving like ghosts. The wind seemed to whisper something, a mixture of warning and alert, and I realized my breath was caught in my throat. I gripped the mask tighter, feeling the dry leather press against my palms. Every nerve in my body lit up, every muscle ready to react. The silent street, the rustling undergrowth, the distant echo of a car, everything seemed to conspire to make me understand that this object had uncomme to me by chance. As I examined the mask more closely, a strange feeling settled in. It was as if someone had recently breathed inside it, as if the past were alive, hovering in the air. A moment passed and I felt my heart almost stop. I remembered the stories of missing comrades, those who never returned and who somehow continued to wander among the living through forgotten objects. The fear I felt wasn't just for the present, it was the weight of a lifetime of battles, betrayals, losses, and memories that refused to die. Suddenly, I heard quick footsteps coming from the parallel street. The metallic sound of boots, firm and determined, approaching. My instincts screamed for me to move away, but something held me there, as if the mask had a silent power over me. Every fiber of my being was alert. Every memory of the war and its horrors surfaced like flashes in my mind. The feeling of imminent danger overwhelmed me, and even without knowing exactly where the threat was coming from, my body reacted. I held the mask close to my face, not to protect myself from the air, but to feel the connection with those who had breathed before me. It was at that moment that I understood. It was not just an object, it was a testimony, a fragment of what we were and what we survived. And so, on that deserted street, with the cold wind cutting my skin and the silence laden with mysteries, I realized that this encounter was not accidental. The breath of the past still lingered, and I, a veteran marked by battles that most would never know, would be forced to confront more than just memories. The moment was tense, heavy with mystery, and left a question hanging in the air. Who or what had left that mask there? And more importantly, why now? Each shadow seemed to hold answers, and each breath I took mixed past and present, preparing the ground for something I couldn't yet fully comprehend. I didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain, that encounter would change everything. My name is John, and the years I carry within me have not been easy. Before the war, I was just a young man with simple dreams, to study, to travel, maybe to build a family. My life was peaceful, but the war came and ripped everything from me with a silent and devastating force. When the first enlisted, I was driven by a sense of duty, by something I could barely name, perhaps courage, perhaps naivete. I remember the day I left my hometown. The feeling that I was leaving for something bigger, something impossible to fully comprehend, but which promised meaning. On the battlefield, I learned that the world was not made of plans or hopes. It was made of survival, of seconds that seemed eternal, and of memories that permeated the soul like invisible scars. Each explosion, each shot, each scream became a mark that I would carry for the rest of my life. I saw friends disappear before my eyes, men who laughed and argued with me at breakfast and who, the next day, were swallowed up by the war. The smell of gunpowder, smoke, iron, and blood became as familiar as the air I breathed, and it still accompanies me today, even in silent streets or abandoned houses. When I return to these places, even decades later, I feel that the past never truly left me. It is there, on every corner, in every forgotten object, in every breath that echoes memories I tried to bury. I carry with me the weight of impossible decisions. Who to save, who to leave behind, which orders to obey and which to question. War does not teach glory. It teaches choices, and its consequences weigh like lead on the conscience. I saw men lost in minutes and moments of bravery turn into tragedies, and I learned that courage and fear often coexist in the same instant. Before serving, I had my own life, dreams that seemed important, but which have now become insignificant in the face of what I witnessed. My heart learned to beat cautiously, because each beat could be the last. I saw destroyed cities, shattered families, children's faces that would never smile again. Each scene left a mark that even time couldn't erase, and each memory reminded me that I survived when many didn't have that chance. Surviving brought guilt, yes, but also a profound awareness of the value of life, a value that, paradoxically, makes me miss those who didn't return. After I got home, I expected to find normalcy, but it wasn't there. People looked at me as if I had changed, and in a way I had changed. War isn't just an event that ends. It settles, invisibly, inside you. The sounds of the past haunt me at the most unexpected moments. The crack of a branch in the yard, the creak of an old car, the smell of burnt wood smoke. Everything can become a portal to memories I can't control. Now, walking through silent streets, holding an old gas mask, I realize that my whole life is a bridge between the past and the present. Every object found, every suspicious shadow, every breath I feel, is a reminder that the ghosts of war never truly leave us. They haunt us, they watch us, they shape us. And even with all this baggage, I keep walking. I keep searching for meaning, understanding, perhaps redemption. The past is not just memory. It is a tangible weight. Every battle, every loss, every survival has shaped the man I am today. Someone who knows the value of every breath, who understands silence, who feels the weight of life in every gesture. I carry invisible scars that no one sees, but that constantly remind me of who I was and who I lost. This gas mask now in my hands is more than an old object. It is a symbol of what I lived, what I breathed, and what I continue to try to understand about myself and the world I left behind. As I walk with it, I feel the past watching me, not to punish me, but to remind me that nothing is truly lost, that every breath we take can carry memories, pain, and lessons. And it is this awareness, this silent weight, that guides me, not just as a veteran, but as a man who has learned to survive, to feel, and to reflect on everything he has seen, everything he has lost, and everything he still needs to face. Holding that old gas mask in my hands brought back more than just memories. It brought back a sense of vulnerability I hadn't felt in decades. I walked down the narrow, silent street, feeling each step reverberating my back as if the whole world were watching, and I realized I wasn't alone. A small crowd began to form in the distance, curious onlookers peering from broken windows and half-open doors, whispering amongst themselves about the lone man with a strange object in his hands. A boy approached first, his gaze a mixture of fear and disdain. He stopped a few feet from me and in a voice laden with youthful arrogance asked, "What's that? Did you find that in the street, old man?" I felt the weight of the mockery, not from the boy's voice, but from the tone of the world, which seemed determined to put me in my place, to remind me that I no longer belonged here as before. I replied calmly, holding the mask firmly, "It's more than it looks, and perhaps more than you would understand." The boy laughed, and the sound was enough to attract other glances. A middle-aged woman appeared on the corner, crossing her arms with a disapproving expression. "Why are you walking around here with that? That's dangerous, sir," she said, without even looking directly at me. but projecting onto me all the suspicion and contempt that seemed to hang in the air. Each word was like a silent blow, reinforcing my feeling of isolation and of being judged for something I didn't deserve. But the conflict wasn't just social, it was physical too. As I walked along the sidewalk, trying to ignore the tones, a burly man appeared out of nowhere, slamming his fist against a trash can, making the metal vibrate and the sound echo like a threat. He looked at me with narrowed eyes, assessing, measuring, and I felt every fiber of my body stiffen. The old survival instinct that the war taught me triggered instantly. I knew that man could try to intimidate me, and I knew that every decision I made would be decisive. While keeping the mask close to my chest, I realized the entire atmosphere was charged with tension. People weren't just curious. They were judgmental, ready to condemn without understanding. My steps slowed, my senses sharpened, and every detail became crucial. The movement of hands, the position of the body, the tone of voice. I knew that any false move could provoke an unnecessary confrontation, but also that inaction could be interpreted as weakness. The conflict then began to intensify. The boy approached again, this time with a group of friends, laughing maliciously, pointing at the mask as if it were a ridiculous and useless object. One of them said, "You must be crazy, old man. That's trash." The contempt was palpable, as if the past I carried was a joke to them. For a moment, I felt frustration overwhelm me, the same frustration I felt when young recruits underestimated me in military training. The difference is that, back then, I had a uniform, authority, and recognized experience. Now, I only had my memories and an object forgotten by time. However, even in the midst of the humiliation, I felt something ignite within me. An ancient sense of duty, of courage, of survival. Each taunt was a challenge, and each disdainful glance, an opportunity to prove that. Despite the years and the invisible scars, there was still someone there who understood the value of life, memory, and truth. The tension grew to the point of almost suffocating. I felt my heart race, my breath become short, every muscle prepared to react. But I didn't just want to react, I wanted to transform that moment into something that others would never forget. It was then that I realized that the situation demanded more than physical strength. It demanded presence, intelligence, and the silent courage that war taught me to cultivate. I needed to decide, retreat, succumb to humiliation, or face it with the dignity I have carried since the first day one enlisted. Each second seemed to last an eternity. I knew the decisive moment was approaching, that any gesture could change everything, that the breath of the past still lingered, not just in the mask, but within me, guiding my action. The initial conflict wasn't just about the mask or the judgmental stares. It was about me, about my identity, about proving to myself and to others that experiences and scars are not signs of weakness, but marks of resilience. I was about to discover that that deserted street, those curious onlookers, and the old gas mask held lessons that went far beyond what I imagined. And at that moment, the tension was almost unbearable, preparing the ground for the public humiliation that was approaching, and for the turning point that would change everything. The boy and his friends quickly turned my presence into a spectacle. They surrounded me with scornful glances, pointing at the mask as if it were the most absurd thing anyone could carry. One of them shouted, "Hey, look at the crazy old man with the toy soldier. Who are you going to save with that?" The shrill laughter echoed between the buildings, mixing with the cold, cutting wind that seemed to laugh along. I felt a mixture of anger and resignation rise through my body. Each of their words was like iron on raw flesh, but my hand remained firm on it, the mask as if it were my only defense against the judgment of the world. The middle-aged woman, who had been watching from afar, decided to enter the scene. She approached, hands on her hips, face hardened, voice full of disapproval. "Sir, that's dangerous and childish. Why do you keep showing it like that?" She didn't see me as a man with stories, scars, or experience. She saw me only as an old man out of place, someone who disturbed the normality of the neighborhood. I felt the humiliation deepen, not only because of what they were saying, but because of the indifferent gaze of those passing by, as if I were a ridiculous ornament in the urban landscape. The group of young people began to approach even closer, surrounding me. One of them picked up an empty plastic bottle and banged it on the ground, making the sound echo like fake thunder. They were amused by my every reaction, and I realized that every breath I took, every movement, was analyzed, judged, tested. The feeling of powerlessness overwhelmed me for a moment. The same powerlessness I felt in war situations when decisions beyond my control determined life or death. But there was something different there. It wasn't physical death that threatened. It was the erosion of dignity, of the respect I knew I deserved. Their words cut deeper than any bullet or explosion I had ever faced. Look at the old man, smelling of gunpowder. I bet he's already rotted from the inside. Another shouted, "Go on, show us how brave you are. Just don't break your dentures." The contempt was absolute, not just in the sounds, but in everyone's posture. People appeared at the windows, others peered through open doors, and the silence that should have been my ally seemed to conspire against me. Each laugh was a cruel reminder that the experience, the courage, and the scars I carry meant nothing to them. Even under that public attack, I tried to remain calm. I took a deep breath, feeling the mask vibrate slightly in my hands, as if it itself were aware of the tension and ridicule surrounding me. Each second dragged on, and it seemed that time was testing my resistance as much as the stares and words of those people. The feeling of humiliation was almost physical, a weight on my shoulders, in my muscles, in my mind. It was as if all the past courage, all the training, and all the battles were invisible, ignored by those who could not understand. In an instant, the child approached, curious but still carrying a hint of innocent mockery. "Grandpa, is this something out of a movie?" She looked at me with that cruel naivete that only children possess, and I felt my chest tighten. I could explain, I could try to tell the story, but at that moment, words seemed useless in the face of the tide of scorn and disdain that surrounded me. Every laugh, every comment, every glance was a reminder that even after surviving the war, I could still be underestimated, ridiculed, and ignored. However, as I felt this humiliation rising like a wave, something began to change within me. A silent warmth began to spread, not of anger, but of determination. I knew I couldn't give in to the contempt, that every taunt was an opportunity to demonstrate that true worth doesn't depend on applause or immediate approval. Each of their gestures was an invitation for me to reveal who I really was, not just as a veteran, but as a man who had seen life and death up close, who had faced real enemies and overcome situations that most would never understand. And at that moment, the humiliation that seemed overwhelming began to transform into fuel. A silent, cold, yet powerful fuel, preparing me for the moment that would change everything. The breath of the past lingered even stronger in that air, reminding me that I didn't need their approval to know my worth. I only needed the right moment for the truth to be revealed, for everyone to realize that the courage, experience, and scars I carry were not reasons for laughter, but signs of survival and strength. Public contempt reached its peak, but it also planted the seed of the turnaround. And in the tense silence that followed, with eyes fixed on me and laughter hanging in the air, I knew that the moment to show who I really was about to arrive. The boy and his friends quickly turned my presence into a spectacle. They surrounded me with scornful glances, pointing at the mask as if it were the most absurd thing anyone could carry. One of them shouted, "Hey, look at the crazy old man with the toy soldier. Who are you going to save with that?" The shrill laughter echoed between the buildings, mixing with the cold, cutting wind that seemed to laugh along. I felt a mixture of anger and resignation rise through my body. Each of their words was like iron on raw flesh, but my hand remained firm on the mask as if it were my only defense against the judgment of the world. The middle-aged woman, who had been watching from afar, decided to enter the scene. She approached, hands on her hips, face hardened, voice full of disapproval. "Sir, that's dangerous and childish. Why do you keep showing it like that?" She didn't see me as a man with stories, scars, or experience. She saw me only as an old man out of place, someone who disturbed the normality of the neighborhood. I felt the humiliation deepen, not only because of what they were saying, but because of the indifferent gaze of those passing by, as if I were a ridiculous ornament in the urban landscape. The group of young people began to approach even closer, surrounding me. One of them picked up an empty plastic bottle and banged it on the ground, making the sound echo like fake thunder. They were amused by my every reaction, and I realized that every breath I took, every movement, was analyzed, judged, tested. The feeling of powerlessness overwhelmed me for a moment. The same powerlessness I felt in war situations when decisions beyond my control determined life or death. But there was something different there. It wasn't physical death that threatened. It was the erosion of dignity, of the respect I knew I deserved. Their words cut deeper than any bullet or explosion I had ever faced. Look at the old man, smelling of gunpowder. I bet he's already rotted from the inside. Another shouted, "Go on, show us how brave you are. Just don't break your dentures." The contempt was absolute, not just in the sounds, but in everyone's posture. People appeared at the windows, others peered through open doors, and the silence that should have been my ally seemed to conspire against me. Each laugh was a cruel reminder that the experience, the courage, and the scars I carry meant nothing to them. Even under that public attack, I tried to remain calm. I took a deep breath, feeling the mask vibrate slightly in my hands, as if it itself were aware of the tension and ridicule surrounding me. Each second dragged on, and it seemed that time was testing my resistance as much as the stares and words of those people. The feeling of humiliation was almost physical, a weight on my shoulders, in my muscles, in my mind. It was as if all the past courage, all the training, and all the battles were invisible, ignored by those who could not understand. In an instant, the child approached, curious but still carrying a hint of innocent mockery. "Grandpa, is this something out of a movie?" She looked at me with that cruel naivete that only children possess, and I felt my chest tighten. I could explain, I could try to tell the story, but at that moment, words seemed useless in the face of the tide of scorn and disdain that surrounded me. Every laugh, every comment, every glance was a reminder that even after surviving the war, I could still be underestimated, ridiculed, and ignored. However, as I felt this humiliation rising like a wave, something began to change within me. A silent warmth began to spread, not of anger, but of determination. I knew I couldn't give in to the contempt, that every taunt was an opportunity to demonstrate that true worth doesn't depend on applause or immediate approval. Each of their gestures was an invitation for me to reveal who I really was, not just as a veteran, but as a man who had seen life and death up close, who had faced real enemies and overcome situations that most would never understand. And at that moment, the humiliation that seemed overwhelming began to transform into fuel. A silent, cold, yet powerful fuel, preparing me for the moment that would change everything. The breath of the past lingered even stronger in that air, reminding me that I didn't need their approval to know my worth. I only needed the right moment for the truth to be revealed, for everyone to realize that the courage, experience, and scars I carry were not reasons for laughter, but signs of survival and strength. Public contempt reached its peak, but it also planted the seed of the turnaround. And in the tense silence that followed, with eyes fixed on me and laughter hanging in the air, I knew that the moment to show who I really was about to arrive. The silence that settled after the upheaval was heavy, but it carried a strange quality, a kind of silent reverence. The same group that had previously surrounded me with mockery now seemed uncertain, hesitant, as if reality had crumbled before their eyes. The old gas mask in my hands, once a source of derision, had become a visible testament to history and survival, and each scratch on its surface seemed to tell more than any words could convey. One of the young men, the same one who had begun to mock me, approached timidly, his gaze a mixture of curiosity and respect. His voice faltered for a moment, heavy with surprise and confusion. This is real. You were there." I shook my head, allowing the weight of my experience to speak for me. I didn't need to detail each battle, each explosion, each lost friend. My posture, my firm gaze, and the mask in my hands conveyed everything. Others began to approach, closing the cautious distance that had previously separated them from me. There was no more laughter, only genuine curiosity, a silent recognition of the truth they had ignored. Even the middle-aged woman who had reprimanded me moments before now bowed slightly, her arms uncrossed, with an expression of understanding and respect. Every small gesture, every glance, seemed to reinforce that humiliation had given way to something greater. Justice, not just external, but symbolic. I felt something change inside me too. The tension that had accompanied me since I found the mask began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of completion. Every step, every taunt, every shadow of doubt had transformed into silent validation. I realized that respect didn't need to be shouted or announced. It could arise from simple gestures, from glances that finally understood the value of someone who had carried so much in silence. My comrade, who remained nearby, placed his hand on my shoulder and spoke firmly, almost as a reminder of old times. "They finally see what you are, John. It's only a matter of time before they fully understand." I smiled slightly, not out of pride, but out of a silent relief I hadn't felt in a long time. Justice, in a subtle yet powerful way, didn't come through words or punishments. It came through the recognition of the truth, the history, and the dignity that no one could take from me. As I looked at the young people, now silent, I realized something deeper was happening. They not only respected me, they were beginning to understand that each scar, each battle, and each memory carried by a veteran was not a reason for mockery, but for learning. The gas mask, so despised moments before, had become a symbol of resistance, courage, and sacrifice, and I felt a silent connection with everyone who had ever worn something similar, facing unimaginable fears and challenges. The street that had once seemed hostile now seemed different. The cold wind still blew, but no longer like a knife. It seemed to carry a whisper of understanding, a murmur that the truth had finally found its way. Each look from those present reinforced the feeling of justice. They recognized that my worth did not depend on immediate approval, but on the silent integrity I have carried for decades. Even with justice being served, something deeper emerged, a connection to the past, to those who did not return, to the battles that shaped my life and my character. The external recognition was merely a reflection of something I already knew. True respect does not come from applause, but from the awareness of who you are and what you have survived. Each gesture of recognition from those present reinforced that, even amidst contempt, dignity can prevail, and that history and experience have their weight, even when ignored by those who did not understand them. In the end, I felt a strange mixture of relief, silent pride, and sadness for those who could not witness such a moment. The gas mask rested in my hands, heavy not only from the metal and rubber, but from the meaning it carried. It was not just an object. It was proof that, despite humiliation, contempt, and invisible scars, the truth always finds its way to reveal itself, and recognition, even if belated, always has its value. At that moment, I realized that justice did not need to be spectacular. It was enough to be true. And for me, a veteran scarred by war and life, that truth was more valuable than any applause or immediate recognition. I had survived, resisted, and now I was finally seen for who I truly was, someone who carried the past with dignity and strength. Oh, as I held the now recognized gas mask, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me, so intense that for a moment I was speechless. It wasn't just the respect I had earned. It was the vivid memory of everything I had lost, everything I had faced, all the battles, visible and invisible, that shaped the man I am today. Every scar, every pain, every friend who didn't return was there, pulsing silently within me. I could feel their weight in the breath that now flowed more intensely, as if the past was finally connecting with the present. I closed my eyes for a moment and the world around me disappeared. I was transported back to the darkest days of the war. I remember fallen comrades, the feeling of helplessness when I couldn't save them, the smell of gunpowder mixed with blood and heavy rain. I remember the icy dawns, the silent battlefields after the storm, and the distant sound of orders shouting through the chaos. All of this, which seemed buried in the depths of memory, resurfaced with an almost painful clarity. The mask in my hands was more than metal and rubber. It was a portal to those moments, a tangible link to all those who braved fear and courage before me. I missed my fallen comrades, and for a moment, the street that had once seemed silent and hostile became a sanctuary of memories. Each look from those who had once mocked me now reminded me that even in times of contempt, the truth can manifest itself. But at the same time, I felt a pang of melancholy. Life went on, and many never had the chance to see this kind of recognition. The mask was the voice of those who could no longer speak, and I carried it with respect and reverence. As I walked slowly, absorbing the silence and the gazes around me, I realized something profound. The war not only shaped me, but taught me to value every moment, every memory, and every breath. The world might not understand my scars or the depth of my suffering, but I did. Each trauma, each loss, and each moment of courage I had lived through had formed an essential part of my being. And now, in the quiet of the street, with the cold wind cutting my skin, I realized that the deepest connection I could have was not with the crowd, but with myself, with the man who survived, who learned, and who still carried hope. I also felt the presence of my comrades in an almost physical way. It was as if the air around me was charged with their silent voices, reminding me of the lessons they had learned together: courage, sacrifice, and the importance of maintaining dignity even when all seems lost. The gas mask, with its pungent smell and scarred surface, was a tangible symbol of this connection, reminding me that although time passes, the past never completely disappears. It remains shaping who we are and guiding our actions with invisible force. As the gazes softened around me, I felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. It wasn't just external justice that touched me, but the realization that my experiences had meaning, that my survival and resilience mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that the pain and the memories were not just burdens, but part of something bigger. The profound understanding that every life lost, every sacrifice, and every moment of fear contributed to shaping the person I am today. The wind carried with it the scent of dry leaves and damp earth, mingling with the ancient odor of the mosque. And in that instant, I realized that the emotional connection I felt was not just with the past or with those around me, but with every aspect of my own existence. I had survived the chaos, the pain, and the injustice, and now I could deeply feel every memory, every emotion, and every breath as part of a cycle that was still unfolding. And so, standing on that silent street, holding the mosque and absorbing the meaning of everything I had lived through, I understood that war, humiliation, and recognition do not only define the external world, they define the internal world. True strength, true courage, and true justice reside in how we feel, remember, and honor our own history. And in that instant, I felt more whole, more aware, and more connected than I had ever been before. I didn't have time to breathe, even though I wanted to. Each second seemed to drag on, laden with a tension that made it almost impossible to think clearly. The cold wind, which before had brought only memories and silence, now seemed to carry a real, invisible but intense threat. The young man who had previously mocked me had retreated, but the air was thick with expectation. Something was about to happen, and I could feel it in every fiber of my body. The gas mask in my hand seemed to vibrate with its own energy, as if it too perceived the imminent danger. That's when I heard the metallic crack again, closer this time. A shadow moved among the rubble of the broken wall, and my veteran instinct kicked in immediately. I knew I couldn't hesitate. Every misstep could turn the moment into disaster. My hand gripped the mask tighter, and I felt the history of thousands of past breaths propel me forward. Every battle memory, every training session, every life-hanging situation came flooding back to my mind in intense flashes. I couldn't fail now, not for myself, not for those who had trusted me, not for those who had no voice. The figure that emerged before me was unfamiliar, but its demeanor was menacing. There was something in the way it moved, in the way it looked around, as if studying every detail, every person, every gesture. The air seemed to vibrate with danger. I felt my breath quicken, my body stiffen, but my mind remained sharp, ready to act. Each step I took toward the shadows seemed amplified, echoing like a war drum. I knew the tension had reached its peak, that this instant would decide everything, whether I would be just a ridiculed man or someone who would finally assert himself. Then the shadow moved quickly, emerging from the corner of the street, revealing a menacing presence, a burly man with obvious intentions of intimidation. His expression was harsh, eyes narrow and focused, fists clenched. The silence around us became almost palpable, each unconscious witness holding their breath as if everyone knew that the next instant would be decisive. I felt my heart beat faster, but not from fear. It was pure adrenaline, that kind of clarity that only experience in extreme situations can provide. I held the gas mask in front of me, not only as physical protection, but as a symbol of what I carried: memory, courage, and the weight of everything I had lived through. The presence of the mask, old and marked, seemed intimidating not only because of the past it carried, but because of the silent meaning I embodied. The man hesitated, surprised by the firm and confident posture I maintained, despite his stature and aggressiveness. It was a confrontation of energy, almost invisible, but totally felt. As he advanced, each of my steps was calculated. My mind revisited old strategies, movements learned in situations far worse than this one. A small gesture, a tilt of the body, and I realized that I had control of the situation, not by force, but by mastery of experience. The tension reached unbearable levels. Each second seemed to last minutes. Each breath was measured. Each glance assessed intentions and consequences. The world around us disappeared, leaving only the silent confrontation between past and present, between fear and courage, between ridicule and dignity. Then something unexpected happened. My comrade, who had been silent until then, intervened with a firm presence, amplifying the silent authority that already emanated from him. The man hesitated, and I realized that the balance of the situation was shifting. The tension did not disappear, but transformed from fear to opportunity, from danger to the moment of showing that truth and experience always prevail. Every witness present, every shadow, and every detail around seemed to align, preparing the ground for the resolution that was to come. The maximum tension had reached its climax. The entire street seemed to hold its breath along with me. It was the moment that would define not only my respect for those who doubted me, but also the silent confirmation that my history, my scars, and my experience could not be denied. I was ready to face the ultimate challenge, not with anger, but with the strength of someone who survived, who breathed the worst of the past and still carries dignity and courage. And so, standing on that street with the mask in my hands and the presence of my past beside me, I realized that each breath, each shadow, and each memory came together to create the most intense moment of my life, the point where courage, experience, and truth met, about to reveal that nothing could erase the value of everything I represented. When the tension finally dissipated, I stood there, feeling the street around me as if it were part of me. The silence that took over was not empty. It was full of meaning, of silent recognition, of belated understanding. The looks that had once been mocking now carried respect, curiosity, and perhaps even admiration. The gas mask still rested in my hands, heavy with metal with the past and the history it carried, but light and straight. We, as if it had finally fulfilled its role, revealing the truth I had always known existed within me. The crowd slowly dispersed, each person carrying with them an impression they would likely carry for the rest of their lives. Some cast lingering glances of respect, others merely murmured amongst themselves, still trying to process what they had witnessed. But for me, the impact was not in the immediate recognition. It was in the silent certainty that my story, my courage, and my scars had not been in vain. Every moment of humiliation, every disdainful laugh, and every look of distrust served to make the victory more meaningful, more profound. As I walked through the now quieter streets, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not the weight of life, nor of war, but the weight of the need to be understood. Finally, the truth about who I am, about my courage, my losses, and my experience had been acknowledged, even if subtly and silently. Each step felt lighter, each breath clearer. The old scarred gas mask seemed to pulse with its own energy, reminding me of the battles fought, the lives lost, and the resilience I had carried through decades. The internal impact was as profound as the external one. I reflected on how life goes on even after war, even after contempt and injustice. Every action, every choice, every silence, and every word has consequences that extend far beyond the moment they occur. The experience taught me that dignity does not depend on the approval of others, but on the integrity we maintain, the respect we give ourselves, and the courage we choose to carry, even in the face of hostility and misunderstanding. As I walked through the streets, I felt the weight of the past again, but in a different way. Now it wasn't a burden, but a legacy. Every scar, every painful memory, and every loss I had faced had transformed into strength, and that strength manifested not only in me, but also in the perception of the people around me. Those who had previously doubted now recognized, even unconsciously, That experience cannot be ignored, that someone's history and past have power and meaning, and that true courage manifests itself in subtle but irreversible ways. The gas mask, finally, was not just an old object. It had become a symbol of survival, resilience, and truth. Each scratch and mark told a story that no one could erase. I carried it with reverence, knowing that its weight was a reflection of the weight of the world I had faced, the battles fought, and the silent strength that allowed me to keep standing despite everything. As the sun began to set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets, I realized that this experience had changed something in me. Not only the way others saw me, but the way I saw myself. Justice had been subtly, but definitively served. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone, but the silent recognition around me served as confirmation that everything I had faced, everything I had carried, and everything I had survived had meaning. And at that moment, walking with the mask still in my hand, I felt that every future step would be guided not by fear, not by contempt or humiliation, but by the silent certainty that my story is valuable, that my experiences matter, and that, despite the pain, loss, and loneliness, life still offers moments of justice, recognition, and deep reflection. War, contempt, and humiliation define not only who we are in the eyes of others, they define who we are with ourselves. And at that instant, for the first time in a long time, I felt that my entire life, every loss, every silent victory, and every breath of the past had found its place, forming a legacy that no one could deny.